The city thrummed outside, a restless heartbeat against the cool glass. Rain slicked the streets, reflecting the neon glow of Bellanotte, a place I'd heard whispered about for months. Finally, tonight was my night. A solo mission. 30 years old, and sometimes you just need to treat yourself to a damn good plate of pasta. I'd managed to snag a table right by the window, a tiny square of coveted real estate overlooking the chaos. The scent of garlic and oregano hung heavy in the air, a comforting blanket against the loneliness that had been nipping at my heels lately. I took a sip of the Chianti, the warm liquid burning a pleasant trail down my throat. This was good. This was mine. My phone buzzed, a text from my sister Sarah, asking if I'd found anyone interesting yet. I rolled my eyes and typed back a sarcastic reply about how a plate of carbonara was currently the most interesting thing in my life. A lie, maybe. A defense mechanism, definitely. I was just getting into a particularly juicy Reddit thread about conspiracy theories when the world tilted, or more accurately, my little corner of it did. A young waiter, barely out of his teens, approached my table, a nervous smile plastered on his face. "Excuse me, sir? Would you mind terribly if we moved you to another table?" My fork froze halfway to my mouth. "Moved me? Why?" He shuffled his feet. "Well, we have a rather large family waiting, and we need to push a couple of tables together. The only way to do it is if you move to, well, we have a table near the kitchen." He gestured vaguely towards the back. I followed his gaze. The table near the kitchen. The land of clanging pots, shouting cooks, and the constant in and out rush of staff. The polar opposite of my cozy window perch. I looked at the family, a mom, a dad, 2 rambunctious kids who were already bouncing off the walls, and what looked like grandparents. 6 in total. They were all hovering near the entrance, radiating a collective air of impatient expectation. The mother, a tightly wound woman with sharp features, caught my eye and gave me a look that could curdle milk. Something inside me hardened, not just because I was comfortable, not just because I was enjoying my hard-earned solitude, but because of that look. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I'm settled in. I'd rather not move." The waiter's smile faltered. "Oh, okay. I understand." But his eyes said otherwise. They darted back to the family, then back to me, pleading. "Perhaps you could find another arrangement," I suggested, maybe a little too sharply. He mumbled something about seeing what he could do and scurried away, leaving me feeling like a complete and utter villain. I picked at my pasta, the taste suddenly metallic in my mouth. The mother of the family was now engaged in a hushed, but clearly agitated, conversation with the waiter. I couldn't make out the words, but I caught the phrase unbelievable and the pointed glare she shot in my direction. Then I heard it. "Wow. Some people have no consideration," she said, loud enough for me and probably half the restaurant to hear. My blood simmered. I wanted to stand up, walk over there, and tell her exactly what I thought of her entitlement. But I didn't. I just sat there, feeling the weight of her judgment, the burning shame of being labeled inconsiderate. I finished my meal in a haze of self-consciousness, every bite tasting like ashes. The family was eventually seated at 2 separate tables, their grumbling a constant undercurrent to the restaurant's usual hum. I paid the bill, left a larger than usual tip for the harassed waiter, and practically fled. Bellanotte, the rain seeming to mock my misery. The city felt colder now, the neon lights harsher. I hailed a cab, sinking into the worn leather seat, the image of that woman's disapproving face seared into my mind. Had I been wrong? Was I truly just being a selfish, inconsiderate prick? The question haunted me for days. It echoed in the sterile silence of my apartment, bounced off the walls of my office, and even intruded on my dreams. The memory of that woman's words, no consideration, played on repeat, a broken record scratching at my sanity. I knew I needed to talk to someone, to get an outside perspective. But who? My parents would just tell me I was being too sensitive. My brother, Mark, would probably laugh and say I should have told her to shove it. Then I thought of Chloe. Chloe had always been the voice of reason in my life, my confidant, well, more than a friend, maybe. But that ship had sailed a long time ago. We'd drifted apart after college, different paths, different priorities, but we still managed to stay in touch. A phone call here, a quick coffee there. I hadn't spoken to her in a few months, but I figured if anyone could cut through the noise in my head, it was her. I dialed her number, my heart pounding a little faster than it should. She answered on the third ring, her voice warm and familiar. Liam! Hey! What's up? I hesitated, unsure how to even begin. Hey, Chloe! Listen, I need to ask you something. I need your honest opinion. I launched into the story, recounting every detail of the Bellinate incident, from the initial pleasure of the window seat to the sting of the woman's accusation. I held nothing back, laying bare my guilt, my confusion, my self-doubt. When I was finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could practically feel Chloe's gears turning, her analytical mind dissecting the situation. Finally, she spoke. Okay, Liam, let me get this straight. You were enjoying a quiet dinner. You paid for your meal. You had every right to be there. And this woman expected you to inconvenience yourself for her convenience? Yeah, but... I started to protest, but she cut me off. But nothing! Liam, you did nothing wrong. You were being perfectly reasonable. This woman was being entitled. Period. Her words were like a balm to my wounded ego. Relief flooded through me, washing away the guilt and self-doubt. You really think so? I know so. Look, it's nice to be accommodating, sure, but you don't owe anyone anything. You're not obligated to sacrifice your comfort for the sake of someone else's convenience, especially when they're being rude about it. But Sarah said, Sarah's a bleeding heart, Chloe interrupted, a hint of exasperation in her voice. She always sees the best in everyone, even when they don't deserve it. You need to stop letting other people dictate your feelings. Her words struck a chord. It wasn't just about the restaurant. It was about a pattern in my life, always trying to please others, always second-guessing myself, always bending over backwards to avoid conflict. You're right, I said, the realization dawning on me. I do that all the time. I know you do. It's one of your endearing qualities, she added with a chuckle. But it's also something you need to work on. You need to learn to stand your ground, Liam. You need to learn to prioritize your own needs sometimes. We talked for another hour, dissecting my ingrained people-pleasing tendencies. Chloe was insightful, honest, and brutally direct. By the time we hung up, I felt like a weight had been lifted. But the relief was short-lived, because that night, I had a dream. I was back at Bellinate, sitting at the window seat. But the restaurant was different, darker, more menacing. The family was there too, but their faces were distorted, grotesque. The mother pointed at me, her eyes burning with hatred. You ruined our night, she hissed, her voice a rasping whisper. You selfish bastard. You deserve to suffer. The restaurant started to shake, the walls closing in. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I was trapped, suffocating under the weight of their collective anger. I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. The dream was so vivid, so real. It was just a dream, I told myself. Just a stupid, irrational dream. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it was starting to grow. Sleep became a battlefield. Night after night, the dream returned, each time more vivid, more terrifying. The family's accusations intensified, their hatred more palpable. I started to dread going to bed, knowing that I would be dragged back into that nightmare realm. The anxiety seeped into my waking life. I became withdrawn, irritable, and paranoid. I found myself constantly scanning faces in crowds, convinced that the woman from the restaurant was lurking around every corner, ready to unleash her wrath. I tried to rationalize it. It was just stress, I told myself. I was working too hard, not getting enough sleep. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. The guilt, the self-doubt, the fear, it was all consuming me. One evening, after another sleepless night, I did something I knew I shouldn't. I Googled Bella Notte restaurant reviews. I told myself it was just to see if other people had had similar experiences. But I knew the truth. I was searching for validation, for confirmation that I wasn't a monster. The reviews were mostly positive, praising the food, the atmosphere, the friendly service. But then I found it. A 1-star review, posted just a few days after my visit. Terrible experience. The food was okay, but the staff was incredibly rude and inconsiderate. We were a large family, and they refused to accommodate us, even though there was a single person sitting at a table that could have easily been combined with another. Some people are just selfish and have no respect for families. The review was anonymous, but I knew. I knew it was her, the woman from the restaurant. She had twisted the narrative, painting me as the villain, the uncaring singleton who had ruined her family's night. Rage surged through me, hot and blinding. I wanted to respond to the review, to defend myself, to set the record straight. But I knew it would be pointless. It would just fuel the fire, drawing me deeper into this ridiculous drama. But the damage was done. The review was like a poison seeping into my bloodstream. I became obsessed. I started checking the review page multiple times a day, waiting for another attack. I even started looking for other online mentions of the restaurant, hoping to find more clues about the woman and her family. It was insane, I knew it, but I couldn't stop myself. I was spiraling down a rabbit hole of my own making. One evening, I stumbled upon a local parenting forum, and there, buried in a thread about restaurant recommendations for large families, was a post that made my blood run cold. Has anyone tried Bella Notte? We went there last week, and it was a disaster. The food was okay, but some jerk refused to move his table so we could all sit together. Ruined the whole night. The poster's username was Moma4. My hands trembled as I clicked on the username, praying that it was someone else, anyone else. But there it was. A profile picture of a woman, her face partially obscured by a baseball cap. But I recognized her eyes. The sharp, disapproving eyes that had haunted my dreams. It was her. I clicked on her profile, my heart pounding in my chest. She was a regular poster on the forum, sharing stories about her kids, her struggles, her triumphs. She seemed like a normal, everyday mom. Except she was also the woman who had branded me as inconsiderate, who had poisoned my mind with guilt and self-doubt, who had invaded my dreams and turned them into nightmares. I scrolled through her posts, reading about her life, her family. I learned her name, Deborah. I learned about her husband, her kids, her job. I learned about her hopes, her fears, her dreams. The more I learned, the more confused I became. How could someone who seemed so normal, so relatable, be capable of such vitriol? Why was she so obsessed with me, with my refusal to move my table? I knew I should stop. I knew I was getting too invested. But I couldn't help myself. I was drawn to her, fascinated by her, repelled by her. I was obsessed. The line between reality and obsession blurred. I knew things had gone too far. Chloe, sensing something was deeply wrong, had urged me to seek therapy. Mark had flatly told me to get a grip. They didn't understand. Nobody could. I'd found Deborah's Facebook profile. Public. Photos of her kids, her husband, her vacations. A perfect, curated life. And then a post about a school fundraiser held at a local community center. The community center was 5 minutes from my apartment. An idea, dark and twisted, took root in my mind. I knew I shouldn't do it. It was insane, reckless, and potentially dangerous. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to confront her, to understand her, to make her see the damage she had caused. I justified it to myself. I wouldn't cause a scene. I'd just talk to her. Calmly, rationally. The day of the fundraiser dawned. gray and overcast. My stomach churned with a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. I showered, shaved, and put on my most neutral outfit, a pair of jeans and a plain gray t-shirt. I wanted to blend in, to be invisible. The community center was buzzing with activity. Kids were running around, parents were chatting, and tables were laden with baked goods and crafts. I scanned the crowd, my heart pounding in my chest. Then I saw her. Deborah! She was standing near a table piled high with cupcakes, her back to me. She was wearing a floral dress and her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She looked normal. I took a deep breath and started to walk towards her, my legs feeling heavy and unsteady. Deborah? I said, my voice barely a whisper. She turned around, her eyes widening in surprise. She studied me for a moment, her brow furrowed in confusion. Then recognition dawned. Her eyes narrowed, hardening into slits. You, she said, her voice cold and sharp. My carefully rehearsed speech evaporated. I stood there, speechless, staring at the woman who had haunted my every waking moment. What do you want? She demanded, her voice laced with hostility. I just wanted to talk, I stammered. Talk? About what? About how you ruined my family's dinner? No, about how you ruined mine. The words burst out of me, unbidden and raw. She scoffed. Oh, please? You're being ridiculous, am I? You posted that review, didn't you? You told everyone I was selfish and inconsiderate. Because you were. We just wanted to sit together as a family, and I wanted to enjoy a quiet dinner. Is that so wrong? Yes, when it comes at the expense of others. Our voices were rising, drawing the attention of nearby parents. I saw a few people staring at us, their faces etched with concern. You have no idea what you've done, I said, my voice trembling with anger and frustration. You've turned my life upside down. I haven't slept in weeks. I'm having nightmares. I'm obsessed with you. The words hung in the air, raw and vulnerable. Deborah's face softened for a moment, a flicker of something that might have been guilt crossing her features. But then it was gone, replaced by a steely resolve. You need help, she said, her voice flat. You're clearly not well. She turned to walk away, but I grabbed her arm. Please, just listen to me, I pleaded. I just want to understand why you did this. Why you're so angry. She yanked her arm away, her eyes blazing. Stay away from me, and stay away from my family. She stormed off, leaving me standing there, humiliated and defeated. The stares of the other parents felt like daggers. I turned and fled the community center, the sound of Deborah's words ringing in my ears. You need help. Back in my apartment, the walls seemed to close in, suffocating me. I sank onto the couch, burying my face in my hands. Deborah was right. I did need help. My confrontation had achieved nothing. It had only confirmed my worst fears, that I was a crazy, obsessed stalker. I had become the monster I had feared. Tears streamed down my face, hot and bitter. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of guilt, shame, and despair. I picked up my phone, intending to call Chloe, to beg for her forgiveness. But then I hesitated. What was the point? She would just tell me I was an idiot, that I had brought this all on myself. Instead, I dialed another number. Sarah. My sister answered on the first ring. Liam? What's wrong? You sound terrible. I need help, I sobbed. I've messed up so badly. I poured out the whole story, from the initial encounter at Bellinate to the disastrous confrontation at the community center. I spared no detail, holding nothing back. Sarah listened in silence, her breathing the only sound on the other end of the line. When I was finished, she spoke, her voice soft and comforting. Oh, Liam, she said. I'm so sorry. That sounds awful. I'm a terrible person, I cried. I'm a stalker. I'm obsessed. No, you're not, she said firmly. You're just hurting. You made some mistakes, sure, but you're not a bad person. You're just lost. What do? I pleaded. I don't know what to do anymore. The first thing you need to do is forgive yourself, she said. You can't move forward until you let go of the guilt and shame. But how? By acknowledging that you made a mistake, by learning from it, and by moving on, and by getting help. You need to see a therapist, Liam. Someone who can help you process your feelings and develop healthy coping mechanisms. I knew she was right. I had been avoiding therapy for too long, afraid to confront my demons. But now I had no choice. I was drowning, and I needed a lifeline. Okay, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I'll do it. I'll see a therapist. Sarah sighed in relief. Good. That's the first step. And in the meantime, I'm here for you. I'll come over and we can talk. We can watch a movie. We can do whatever you need. Her words were like a ray of sunshine breaking through the darkness. I wasn't alone. I had Sarah. I had Chloe. I had people who cared about me, who wanted to help me. I hung up the phone, feeling a glimmer of hope flicker in my chest. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but I wasn't ready to give up. I made a promise to myself. I would get help. I would confront my demons. I would learn to forgive myself. And I would move on. Therapy was brutal, raw, painful, and utterly necessary. Doctor! Evans, a woman with kind eyes and an even kinder demeanor, patiently untangled the knots in my mind. She helped me understand the root of my people-pleasing tendencies, the insecurity that fueled my self-doubt, and the unhealthy coping mechanisms I had developed over the years. We talked about my childhood, my relationships, my fears. We dissected the Bella Knot incident, examining every detail, every emotion. Doctor. Evans helped me see that my reaction was not entirely irrational, but it was disproportionate. Deborah's judgment had triggered something deep inside me, a fear of rejection, a need for approval. You internalized her criticism, Doctor, Evans explained. You allowed her to define you, and that gave her power over you. But how do I take that power back? I asked. By changing your narrative, she said. By reclaiming your story. By forgiving yourself and moving on. The process was slow and arduous. There were days when I felt like I was making progress, and days when I felt like I was sliding backwards. But I kept showing up, kept talking, kept working. Doctor! Evans also encouraged me to set boundaries, to prioritize my own needs, and to practice self-compassion. She taught me mindfulness techniques to manage my anxiety and to quiet the voices in my head. Slowly, gradually, I began to heal. The nightmares faded, the obsession receded, the guilt diminished. I started to reconnect with friends and family. I spent more time with Sarah and Chloe. I even started dating again. The scars of the Bella Knot incident would always be there, a reminder of a dark chapter in my life. But they no longer defined me. I had learned from my mistakes. I had grown as a person. One day, Dr. Evans suggested that I write a letter to Deborah, not to send, but to help me process my feelings and gain closure. I hesitated. The thought of writing to Deborah filled me with anxiety. But I trusted Dr. Evans, so I agreed to try. It took me several days to write the letter. I started and stopped countless times, struggling to find the right words. Finally, I finished it. In the letter, I acknowledged my mistakes. I apologized for my obsessive behavior. I explained the impact that her words had had on me. But I also confronted her. I challenged her to examine her own behavior, to consider the consequences of her actions. I asked her to forgive me, but I also forgave her. I didn't send the letter, but the act of writing it was cathartic. It helped me to release the anger, the resentment, the fear. I had finally found peace. Months passed. I continued therapy, strengthening the foundations of my newfound emotional stability. I started a new job, one that was less stressful and more fulfilling. I even adopted a dog, a scruffy terrier mix named Gus, who filled my life with joy and unconditional love. One afternoon, as I was walking Gus in the park, I saw her. Deborah. She was sitting on a bench, watching her kids play. She looked different, tired, perhaps, more subdued. My heart skipped a beat. Old anxieties surfaced. I considered turning around, walking away, but something stopped me. I took a deep breath and approached her. Gus trotted happily beside me, his tail wagging furiously. Deborah looked up, her eyes widening in surprise. She recognized me instantly. "Liam," she said, her voice barely audible. "Deborah," I replied. An awkward silence descended. Gus, oblivious to the tension, sniffed at Deborah's feet, wagging his tail. "Nice dog," Deborah said, breaking the silence. "Thanks!" "This is Gus." I knelt down and scratched Gus behind the ears. "He's a rescue." "That's nice of you," Deborah said. We fell silent again. The kids continued to play, their laughter echoing in the air. Finally, I spoke. I wanted to apologize," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "For what happened? For my behavior. I know I was wrong." Deborah looked at me, her eyes searching mine. "I was wrong too," she said softly. "I shouldn't have posted that review. It was mean and unnecessary. It's okay," I said. "I forgive you. I've been doing a lot of thinking," she continued, "about what happened. About you. About myself." She paused, taking a deep breath. "I was going through a lot at the time. My marriage was falling apart. I was stressed and overwhelmed. I took it out on you. I understand," I said. "No, I don't think you do," she said. "But I appreciate you saying that." She looked at her kids, her face softening. "They deserve better." "I need to be better. You will be," I said. She smiled, a small, sad smile. "Thank you," she said. "That means a lot." We sat in silence for a few more minutes, watching the kids play. Then Deborah stood up. "I should get going," she said. "It was nice seeing you, Liam." "You too, Deborah," I replied. She walked away, her head held high. I watched her go, a sense of peace settling over me. The encounter had been unexpected, but it had also been healing. We had both acknowledged our mistakes. We had both offered forgiveness. But the story doesn't end there. A week later, I received an email. It was from Deborah. "Liam," the email began. "I know this is going to sound crazy, but I wanted to thank you for talking to me, for forgiving me, for helping me to see things differently. Since our conversation, I've been doing some soul searching. I've realized that I need to make some changes in my life. I've decided to leave my husband." My heart skipped a beat. I couldn't believe what I was reading. "I know it's a big decision," the email continued, "but I'm not happy. I haven't been happy for a long time. I need to do what's best for me and my kids. I'm telling you this because you were a catalyst. You forced me to confront my own unhappiness. You helped me to see that I deserve better. I don't know what the future holds," the email concluded, "but I'm hopeful. I'm excited. And I'm grateful." I stared at the email, speechless. I had been so focused on my own healing, on my own recovery, that I had never considered the impact that I might have had on Deborah's life. I had inadvertently set her free. Life took on a different hue after that email. Knowing I had, even unintentionally, played a part in Deborah's journey towards self-discovery filled me with a strange sense of purpose. It wasn't a responsibility, but a quiet affirmation that even in the darkest of times, change is always possible. Months turned into a year. Gus and I became regulars at the park. I continued therapy, not because I needed it to survive, but because I wanted to thrive. I nurtured my friendships, pursued new hobbies, and allowed myself to dream again. Then, one crisp autumn afternoon, I saw Deborah again at the park. She was alone, reading a book on the same bench where we'd last spoken. Gus, ever the social butterfly, bounded over to her, tail wagging. Deborah looked up, a genuine smile lighting up her face. "Hey, Gus," she said, scratching him behind the ears. "And hey, Liam." "Hey," I replied, feeling a warmth spread through me. I sat down on the bench beside her, a comfortable silence settling between us. The leaves crunched underfoot as the wind rustled through the trees. "How are you doing?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Good," she said. "Really good. The divorce is finalized. It was messy, but it's over. The kids are adjusting, and I'm finally starting to feel like myself again." "I'm glad to hear that," I said. "I'm taking a pottery class," she continued, a hint of excitement in her voice. "It's messy and imperfect, but it's also incredibly therapeutic." I chuckled. "Sounds perfect." She looked at me, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Liam," she said, "for everything." "You don't need to thank me," I said. "We both went through a lot. We both learned from it." "Still," she said, "I wouldn't be where I am today without you." We sat in silence for a few minutes, watching the leaves fall. Then, Deborah spoke again. "I've been thinking," she said. Maybe we could get coffee sometime? Just as friends." My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't expected that, but the idea didn't feel wrong. It felt right. "I'd like that," I said, smiling. "I'd really like that." And so it began. Not a grand, sweeping romance, but a tentative, gentle friendship. We met for coffee, we walked Gus in the park, we talked about our lives, our hopes, our dreams. I learned that Deborah was funny, intelligent, and deeply compassionate. She was also flawed, vulnerable, and still healing. But she was genuine, and she was real. Over time, our friendship deepened. We shared our fears, our insecurities, our triumphs. We supported each other through difficult times. We celebrated each other's successes. We learned to trust each other. One evening, as we were walking Gus in the park, Deborah stopped and looked at me, her eyes filled with emotion. "Liam," she said, I'm falling for you." My heart pounded in my chest. I had been feeling the same way, but I had been afraid to say anything. "I'm falling for you too, Deborah," I said. We kissed. It was a simple kiss, but it was also profound. It was a kiss of forgiveness, of understanding, of hope. It was a new beginning. Years later, standing on a sun-drenched beach, watching our children build sandcastles together, I often reflect on the winding path that brought Deborah and me to this point. From a window seat at Bellinot, to a community center confrontation, to a journey of self-discovery, forgiveness, and ultimately, love. Life is messy and unpredictable. We all make mistakes. We all carry baggage. But it's how we learn from those mistakes, how we overcome our challenges, that truly defines us. Deborah and I are a testament to the power of forgiveness, the resilience of the human spirit, and the unexpected beauty that can emerge from the darkest of times. And sometimes, all it takes is a little nudge, even a negative one, to change the trajectory of a life forever. I never would have imagined that a simple refusal to move my table would lead me to my soulmate. But life has a funny way of surprising you. And sometimes, the most unexpected detours lead you to the most beautiful destinations.